The sky over Washington, D.C. tonight felt heavier than usual. Thick clouds obscured the moonlight, casting a gloomy gray hue over the towering buildings. Within the grounds of the White House, amidst the bright floodlights, a small room remained engulfed in silence. Inside the room, Barron Trump sat alone by the window, his eyes intently gazing into the endless void outside. Strong winds battered the window pane, creating sounds that resembled mysterious whispers. Barron didn't know why he felt so restless tonight. A strange sensation lingered, as if something was about to happen. For many consecutive nights, he had been dreaming the same strange dream. In the dream, a man draped in a white cloak stood in the center of a room filled with candles. His voice echoed, sounding as though it came from a faraway place. "You are the descendant of a chosen lineage. Your destiny was written before you were born. Seek the truth." Those words repeated over and over in his mind, preventing Barron from finding peace. At first, he believed it was just a meaningless dream, but as time passed, the images became clearer. The man's eyes were sharp and piercing, not frightening, but filled with authority. The candlelight flickered against his face, creating an atmosphere of mystery. One night, Barron decided to tell his mother, Melania Trump, about the dream. She looked at him thoughtfully, then gently stroked his head without saying a word. Yet, it was this very silence that deepened Barron's suspicion. He began to search for answers. The White House library had been a familiar place to him since childhood, yet there was one room he had never set foot in, the room containing ancient documents, a place rumored to hold secrets never before revealed. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through thick curtains, Barron stepped into that mysterious room. Towering bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes, some so old their covers were barely holding together. He ran his fingers across the dusty titles, his eyes scanning for something he could not yet define. Suddenly, a dark brown leather-bound book caught his attention. It bore no title, no markings of any kind. Yet, as Barron pulled it from the shelf, a thin cloud of dust rose into the air, carrying with it the scent of time. He opened the first page. Faded ink revealed ancient Latin text. "Your name was written before you were born. You are the one destined to change the world." Barron felt his heart pound in his chest. These words were identical to those in his dream. Hastily, he flipped through the pages, searching for more clues. The book spoke of an ancient organization that had existed for centuries, tasked with protecting a special heir, one chosen by God. Sweat began to beat on Barron's forehead. Why were these things here? And why did he feel as though they were speaking directly about him? He continued reading. Each line unveiled an entirely new world, a story he had never heard before. Secrets of a forgotten royal bloodline, battles between light and darkness, and a figure known as the Heir. Barron's hands trembled as he turned to the final page. Under the dim light, he saw a strange embossed symbol on the paper. It didn't resemble any symbol he had ever seen before, yet something deep inside him whispered that he had seen it somewhere. He sat still for a moment, his mind spinning with thousands of unanswered questions. But there was one thing he knew for certain: his life would never be the same again. In the following days, Barron became obsessed with what he had read. He started noticing strange things around him. A few people in the White House, ones he had never paid attention to before, now behaved unusually. They seemed to be watching him, their gazes hinting that they knew something he didn't. And then, on a fateful night, as the clock struck midnight, a cold breeze swept into Barron's room, sending shivers down his spine. He stood up and walked to the window. The sky remained as gloomy as always, but this time, something was different. In the darkness, a shadowy figure stood beneath the ancient tree in the distance. The figure wore a long cloak, and the face was hidden in the shadows. Yet, Barron could feel the figure's eyes, unwavering, locked onto him. Barron's heart pounded wildly. He felt himself being drawn into something far greater than he could ever imagine. And he knew this was only the beginning. Barron couldn't take his eyes off the shadow beneath the tree. Those eyes seemed to pierce into his mind. A strange sensation, part fear, part curiosity, compelled him to open the door and step outside, despite the biting cold of the night wind. He walked slowly, one step at a time, along the stone path leading to the garden behind the White House. The tree swayed in the darkness, making eerie rustling sounds. The figure remained there motionless, as if it had been waiting for Barron for a very long time. "WH, who's there?" Barron's voice cracked, weak against the stillness of the night. There was no response. The figure turned its back to him, the white cloak fluttering gently in the wind. The fear inside Barron grew stronger, but his legs felt compelled to move forward. When he was only a few steps away, the figure slowly turned around. Its face was covered by a gleaming silver mask, leaving only the deep, endless eyes exposed, the very same eyes from Barron's dream. You have found the book. The voice echoed, deep and resonant, as if coming from a distant place. Barron froze. Who are you? Why did you appear in my dreams? That book. What does it mean? The man raised his hand, and from the wide sleeve of his robe, an ancient, yellowed piece of paper slipped out. Barron bent down to pick it up. On the paper, a strange symbol appeared, the very same symbol he had seen on the final page of the book. When the light is obscured by darkness, the heir shall emerge. You are the key, Barron. I don't understand. I'm just a child. I have no power, no strength. Barron shook his head, his voice trembling. The man remained silent, but pointed up to the sky. Above them, the dark clouds slowly parted, revealing the bright, full moon. In that moment, Barron felt as though the entire world had stopped. The truth will find you, whether you want it or not. And with that, the man vanished. A cold gust of wind swept through. Barron quickly looked around, but the mysterious figure had completely disappeared into the night. The truth? The key? The heir? Thousands of questions flooded Barron's mind as he returned to his room. His hand clutched the ancient piece of paper tightly. The symbol on it seemed to emit a faint glow under the moonlight. Does father know about this? The thought suddenly flashed through Barron's mind. The next morning, Barron walked into his father's office. Donald Trump sat behind the large desk, engrossed in a stack of documents. When he saw Barron, he looked up and smiled. Well, son, what brings you here today? It's rare to see you come in. Barron looked straight at his father, suspicion gleaming in his eyes. Do you know anything about the ancient book in the secret library? Donald Trump paused for a moment. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. Ah, that book? Just an antique from our ancestors. Historical records, nothing important. It's not just historical records. I've read it. And I met him, the man from my dreams. A long silence filled the room. Donald Trump stared at his son with a contemplative look. There are things you're not ready to know yet, Barron. Why? I need to know the truth. Donald Trump stood up and walked toward Barron. The truth can be more dangerous than you think. It can destroy you if you're not ready. I am ready. Their eyes locked. Donald Trump sighed deeply. If you've made up your mind, come to the West Wing basement tonight. There's something you need to see. Night fell quickly. Barron walked down the long hallway leading to the West Wing basement, a place he had never set foot in before. A large iron door gradually came into view, old and covered in dust. Donald Trump was already there, standing beside a tall man dressed in a black cloak. Welcome, Barron, the man said in a deep voice that sent chills down Barron's spine. Who is this? Barron asked his father. Donald Trump simply shook his head. He is your guide, the one who will lead you to the truth. The iron door creaked open, revealing a vast room illuminated by dozens of candles. On the far wall, the symbol Barron had seen before was now deeply carved into the stone, glowing brightly. The man in the black cloak approached Barron. Place your hand on the symbol. Why? Barron hesitated. Because it is your mark. The beginning of everything. Barron hesitated for a moment, then slowly placed his hand on the glowing symbol. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted. The room shook violently. Barron felt as though his body was being pulled into another place, a place he had never known. The man's voice echoed through the darkness. Welcome, Heir. Darkness. Barron jolted awake in a completely unfamiliar room. The dim space was faintly lit by torches mounted on stone walls. The cold air seeped into his skin, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil. Where am I? In front of him stood a large wooden door, dark and imposing, covered in strange symbols. Beneath his feet lay a circle drawn with the same Latin characters he had seen in the ancient book. You've arrived. A voice echoed from behind. Barron quickly turned around. A middle-aged man with a cold, stern face stepped out from the shadows. The flickering torchlight revealed a long scar running from his temple down to his chin. Who are you? Barron asked, his voice still trembling. I am Malachi, the keeper of the key to your destiny. And this is where you belong. Barron frowned and took a step back. I don't belong here. Malachi let out a soft laugh, his sharp eyes seeming to pierce through Barron's mind. Don't you see? You have no choice. Your fate was etched into your very blood long before you drew your first breath. Malachi stepped closer to Barron, pointing at the massive door. Beyond this door lies the path to power and truth. but only the heir can open it. Barron stared at the door, his mind filled with confusion. Yet, deep inside, something urged him to move forward. And if I refuse? Malachi was silent for a moment before a cold smile crept across his face. Then you will be consumed by the very darkness you refuse to face. Understood. Barron stood before the great door. His hand trembled as he placed it on the cold wooden surface. The Latin characters carved into the door began to glow faintly. A chilling breeze seeped through the cracks, carrying whispers too faint to understand. Open it, Malachi urged. With a deep breath, Barron pushed against the heavy door. A deep rumble echoed through the air as the massive door slowly creaked open. On the other side was endless darkness. A stone staircase descended into the earth, and Barron felt as though he was gazing into a bottomless abyss. Go down. The truth awaits you. Barron turned to glance at Malachi one last time, then took his first step down the stairs. Why me? Barron whispered. A grand hall appeared at the bottom of the final step. The ceiling soared high above, with massive stone statues lined up on either side. At the center of the hall stood a large stone table, surrounded by 12 chairs. Each chair bore a unique, carved symbol. All the seats were occupied. They were cloaked in black robes, faces concealed behind silver masks. A solemn and dangerous atmosphere hung heavily in the room. Malachi stepped forward, his voice ringing out with authority. Members of the dark sanctum, the heir has arrived. A soft murmur echoed through the hall. Is he truly the heir? A female voice questioned from the left. His blood will prove it, a deep male voice responded. Barron was pulled to the center of the room. A silver dagger was placed on the stone table. Malachi looked directly at Barron. Just one drop of blood. The truth will be revealed. Barron stared at the dagger, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. He knew there was no turning back now. With a slight cut on his finger, Barron let a drop of his blood fall onto the stone table. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. A massive gate appeared at the far end of the hall. Blinding light poured from within. Barron collapsed to the ground, his mind overwhelmed. Strange memories rushed into his consciousness, bloody battles, fallen kingdoms, and a prophecy echoing through the darkness. The one who bears the blood of royalty and darkness shall determine the fate of the world. When Barron lifted his head, he realized that all the members of the sanctum were bowing before him. You are the heir, Malachi declared, his voice filled with reverence. But why me? I don't understand, Barron whispered. Malachi stepped closer, his eyes solemn. You are the only one who can either rule or destroy this world. The path you choose will decide everything. Barron Trump jolted awake. He found himself in a vast, shadowy room with a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. The only source of light came from a circle of burning candles surrounding him. The stone walls were covered in moss, and the cold air seeped through his thin cloak. It felt like an ancient, abandoned chapel. Footsteps echoed through the darkness. Malachi, the man with the long scar on his face, emerged from a dark wooden door. His black cloak billowed with each step, and his pale gray eyes locked onto Barron with a sharp, analytical gaze. Welcome, heir. His voice echoed throughout the room. Who are you? Why did you bring me here? Barron asked, his voice choked with uncertainty. Malachi gave a faint, cryptic smile. You are the central figure in a story that has spanned centuries. I am merely the one guiding you to the next chapter. Barron looked around the dimly lit room. I don't believe it. There's no story. I'm just an ordinary person. Is that what you think? Let me show you. With a wave of his hand, the stone wall behind Malachi slowly slid apart, revealing a narrow underground passage dimly illuminated by flickering torches. Follow me. The truth awaits. The passage was narrow and damp. Barron followed Malachi, each of his footsteps echoing in the stillness. Along the walls were ancient Latin inscriptions, identical to the ones Barron had seen in the book from the White House library. What do these symbols mean? Barron asked. They tell the story of the heir, a person who bears blood that belongs both to darkness and to light. The only one of their kind. And you believe that's me? Malachi stopped and turned his head to Barron. I don't believe. I know. The passage ended at a massive metal door, etched deeply with a symbol Barron recognized, the same symbol he had seen in his dream. Place your hand on the door, Malachi instructed. And if I don't want to? Barron hesitated. Then you will never know the truth. Barron hesitated, but a faint voice echoed in his mind. urging him forward. Slowly, he placed his hand on the symbol. The door began to tremble. A sharp screech echoed as the door slowly opened, revealing a circular room where 12 cloaked figures sat around a large stone table. The dark sanctum. The air was thick and oppressive. Each member of the sanctum wore a silver mask that completely concealed their face. A woman with a cold, piercing voice was the first to speak. "Is he truly the heir?" "The blood will prove everything," a deep male voice replied. On the stone table lay a silver dagger and a golden chalice. Malachi pointed to the dagger. "One drop of blood. The truth will be revealed." Barron hesitated. His breath grew shallow. "What if I refuse?" "No one refuses their fate," Malachi said firmly. With trembling hands, Barron picked up the dagger. A small cut on his fingertip. His blood dripped into the golden chalice. The ground shook violently. Blinding light erupted from the stone table. All 12 members bowed their heads. "You are the heir," the room chanted in unison. In the blinding light, visions flashed through Barron's mind. Bloody battles. A throne made of black stone. A man wearing a golden crown, consumed by darkness. A voice echoed. "The one who bears the blood of royalty and darkness shall determine the fate of the world." As the light faded, Barron opened his eyes. Malachi knelt before him. "We are here to serve you." "I don't want power." Barron stepped back. "Fate does not require your consent," Malachi replied sternly. That night, Barron returned to the White House. He faced his father, Donald Trump. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Donald Trump remained silent, fatigue flashing across his face. "I knew. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would never be able to run from it. You had to find the truth for yourself." Barron felt the weight of the entire world pressing down on his shoulders. On a stormy night, Malachi returned. "It's time," he said. "Time for what?" Barron asked. "To go to the place where your destiny will be decided." Thunder rumbled outside. The true journey into darkness had begun. Footsteps echoed endlessly through the narrow passage. Barron Trump followed Malachi in silence, his mind a tangled mess of thoughts. The air grew thicker, the smell of damp stone and moss making it harder to breathe. Torches along the walls suddenly flared to life as they passed, illuminating ancient reliefs depicting scenes of war, souls wailing in darkness, and finally, the image of a boy standing amidst roaring flames. The boy's eyes were identical to Barron's. "Who is he?" Barron asked, his voice low. "He is you, or he will be you," Malachi replied without turning around. "You will see for yourself at the end of this journey." The passage widened, leading to a vaulted chamber. On the ceiling was a vast mural depicting angels and demons locked in battle. At the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested a massive black leather-bound book, its cover etched with glowing golden symbols. "What is this book?" Barron asked. "History, present, and future. Of the world. And of you," Malachi replied. Malachi opened the book. The pages creaked, and a faint mist rose from within. On the page, a name appeared. Barron Trump. Beneath the name was a passage. "When darkness rises and light fades, the heir shall determine the fate of both. The one who bears the blood of royalty will choose, rule or destroy." Rule or destroy. Were those truly the only two choices left for the entire world? Barron clenched his fists. Every word in the book seemed to press heavily on his chest. "What if I don't want either of those things?" he asked, his eyes burning with defiance. Malachi gazed at him with a look of deep understanding. "No one can refuse destiny, but you can redefine it." Suddenly, the deep toll of a bell echoed throughout the room. 12 shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. Each wore a black cloak and a silver mask that concealed their face. The air grew oppressive, heavy with expectation. "Are you the heir?" a cold female voice asked. "I don't know," Barron replied, his voice trembling yet resolute. "You will know soon enough." In the center of the chamber, a glowing magical circle began to form, its light faint but steady. Malachi pointed to the center of the circle. "Step inside. Your blood will reveal the truth." Barron hesitated, but something deep within his heart urged him forward. As his foot touched the circle, a surge of blue light erupted. The air vibrated. Whispering voices echoed from every direction, as though thousands of souls were speaking all at once. A silver dagger was placed upon the stone table. "Just one drop of blood," Malachi said. Barron gripped the dagger tightly. A small cut. His blood dripped into the center of the glowing circle. The ground shook violently. The light from the circle shifted, first blue, then blazing red. A voice echoed inside Barron's mind. The blood has been shed. Destiny has been sealed. You, who bear the blood of darkness and light, are the one who decides. All the members of the dark sanctum bowed before Barron. You are the heir. That night, Barron stood alone on the balcony of the White House. Below him, the brilliant lights of Washington, D.C. stretched endlessly. But inside his heart, there was only darkness and uncertainty. Rule or destroy. Malachi appeared behind him. The world awaits your choice. And if I don't choose? Barron asked, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. Then the darkness will choose for you. A brilliant light burst from Barron Trump's hand. The 12 members of the dark sanctum simultaneously stepped back as the radiant energy expanded throughout the chamber. The ancient symbols etched on the walls began to tremble, glowing brightly as if reacting to Barron's power. Malachi, the leader of the sanctum, raised his dark eyes, locking them onto Barron's. Do you truly believe you can break fate? His voice thundered with fury. Barron did not answer. Darkness poured from Malachi's cloak, swirling like massive tendrils, rushing toward Barron at terrifying speed. Barron raised his hand, the light in his palm burning with incredible intensity. The two forces collided, unleashing a deafening explosion. The entire room trembled. Outside, the sky above Washington, D.C. darkened. Violent winds swept through the streets, streetlights flickered, and for a moment, the entire city seemed trapped in a nightmare. From a distance, the White House still stood, but it no longer resembled a place of peace. Secret Service agents, clad in black suits, scrambled for weapons, gazing upward at a strange swirling red light illuminating the sky. An unprecedented event was unfolding. Malachi charged forward, his hand reaching out, pulsating with pure dark power. Barron stepped back, gathering every ounce of energy into one final strike. Light and darkness clashed once more. Stone walls cracked. Ancient statues crumbled. The ground shook violently. Members of the dark sanctum were thrown back, some of them swallowed by the shadows, unable to withstand Barron's growing strength. Malachi roared in rage. You cannot fight the inevitable. Barron tightened his fist. I'm not fighting fate. I'm rewriting it. Malachi fell. The darkness slowly withdrew from his body, retreating into a swirling mass of black smoke. For the first time, Barron saw his true face, no longer a figure of malice, but a man consumed by power. You have won, Malachi whispered, his voice weak. But Barron felt no triumph. Only emptiness. The light surrounding Barron gradually dimmed. He knelt beside Malachi, looking into his weary eyes. No one truly wins in a battle like this. The chamber lay in ruins. Barron now stood before the dark throne the dark sanctum had prepared for him. It remained there, waiting for someone to sit upon it and determine the future. Barron reached out and touched it. A voice echoed in his mind. If you sit, the world will lie at your feet. If you refuse, another will take your place. He could feel the weight of the decision. If he sat, he could control everything. If he refused, the world might descend into chaos. Barron closed his eyes. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. There must be another way. He stepped back. I will not do this your way. Raising his hand, a powerful burst of light engulfed the throne. Cracks spread across its dark surface. In a final flash, it shattered into 1,000 fragments of light, disappearing into the air. The dark sanctum was no more. Outside, the skies gradually returned to normal. The swirling storm of energy dissipated. The streets lit up once again. Barron stepped out of the ruined building. He no longer felt fear. No longer hesitated. He had broken the cycle that had bound generations before him. Malachi, once the leader of the dark sanctum, was now just a weary man. He looked at Barron with a mixture of shock and understanding. You found the third path, he whispered. Barron nodded. Not everyone needs to rule. Not everyone needs to destroy. Sometimes, we simply need to be free. Donald Trump stood at the entrance of the White House, watching as his son returned. You did what no one else ever could, he said quietly. Barron remained silent. He did not crave fame or power. He only wanted a world no longer controlled by those lurking in the shadows. The story of the dark sanctum had ended, but Barron Trump's story had just begun. Light exploded from Barron's hand. Columns of fire spiraled upward, clashing against the black smoke swirling from Malachi. The two forces, light and darkness, danced like twin dragons across the night sky, battling for dominance. The 12 members of the dark sanctum knelt in the trembling chamber, their wide eyes glinting with terror. Never before had they witnessed such power, an overwhelming force capable of challenging a sanctum that had endured for centuries. Malachi stumbled back, his face twisted with rage. You cannot fight fate. Don't be foolish, Barron. Barron did not answer. He simply raised his hand, and the light within his palm blazed even brighter. A beam of pure energy shot forward, slicing through the darkness and striking Malachi in the chest. With a scream of agony, Malachi was thrown back, crashing into the stone wall. Cracks spiderwebbed across the chamber's surface. But Malachi was not defeated yet. Wiping blood from his mouth, he gave a bitter laugh. Your power is truly remarkable. But do you really understand what's happening here? Barron frowned. Malachi raised a trembling hand, pointing toward the door behind the dark throne. You think this battle is merely between light and darkness? No, Barron. This is the war of an ancient civilization. You are simply its last heir. The door creaked open. Beyond it lay a room darker than anywhere Barron had ever seen. A vast, bottomless abyss stretched into the shadows. At the center, a colossal black stone coffin floated midair, bound by glowing golden chains anchored to the surrounding walls. Ancient symbols glowed faintly across its surface, trembling as Barron stepped inside. Malachi smiled, a twisted, unsettling grin. This is the true source of your power, Barron. This is where it all began. Barron shuddered. From within the coffin came a voice. It wasn't entirely human, more like an echo rising from the void itself. The final heir. You have come. What is this? Barron demanded, turning to Malachi. Malachi clenched his fists. Inside lies the father of us all. The one who created the dark sanctum. The one who wrote your destiny before you ever drew breath. A chill ran through Barron's veins. And what do you want from me? Malachi raised his hand, his eyes gleaming with madness. Set him free. Let him return and rule the world as he was always meant to. No, Barron said, shaking his head. If he's sealed away, there must be a reason. Malachi hissed with fury. Then you leave me no choice. I'll awaken him myself, with your blood. He lunged. The silver dagger glinted in the dim light. Barron dodged, but Malachi was faster. The blade cut into Barron's arm. A drop of blood fell to the ground. Instantly, the room trembled. The coffin blazed with brilliant light. Finally, I am free. The golden chains cracked, one by one. Malachi burst into wild laughter. It's over, Barron. You cannot stop this now. But Barron did not flinch. He stepped forward, standing directly before the slowly opening coffin. A voice echoed in his mind, a voice he had never heard, yet felt strangely familiar. Only you can end this. Barron understood. This was not the time to fight. It was time to end everything. He raised both hands, summoning all the energy within him. A surge of pure light radiated from his palms, so brilliant that Malachi staggered backward, shielding his eyes. The coffin began to compress. The golden chains, instead of breaking, reversed course, tightening, winding back into place. Malachi screamed in desperation. No, you can't do this. Barron closed his eyes. The chamber shook violently. The light intensified, engulfing everything. The voice inside the coffin roared one final time before being silenced. When the light faded, the chamber was still. The coffin remained fully sealed. The chains glowed brighter than ever, unbroken and unmoving. Malachi collapsed to his knees, broken and defeated. You found the third path. He whispered. Barron turned to him, his expression calm. Not everyone needs to rule. Not everyone needs to destroy. Sometimes, we just need to set everything free. Outside, the skies over Washington, D.C. cleared. The swirling storms of energy dissipated. Lights returned to the city streets. Barron stepped out from the ruins of the ancient chamber. No longer afraid. No longer hesitant. He had broken the cycle that bound generations before him. Donald Trump stood at the White House entrance, watching his son approach. With a quiet smile, he said, You've done what no one else ever could. A spell surfaced in Barron's mind, an ancient incantation he had never learned, yet understood perfectly. O Founder, I return you to the place where you belong. The room trembled violently. The symbols on the walls glowed brilliantly one final time. And then silence. The coffin vanished. The dark sanctum dissolved. Malachi knelt, powerless. He looked at Barron. The hatred in his eyes was gone, replaced by sheer despair. You destroyed everything. He whispered. Barron gazed at him one last time. No, I just freed the world. The final light faded. Barron opened his eyes and found himself standing on the balcony of the White House. Below him, Washington, D.C. remained peaceful. No sign of the battle. No trace of the dark sanctum. Donald Trump stood behind him. "You did it, Barron." Barron looked up at the sky. No throne. No crown. But he knew that from this day forward, the world would begin a new chapter. The story of the heir had ended, but Barron's journey was only beginning. 3 days after the final battle, Barron Trump awoke in his familiar room at the White House. Morning light filtered through the curtains, but peace did not follow. Everything should have been over. The dark sanctum had crumbled. Malachi was no longer a threat. Yet something felt wrong. He felt it. A cold breeze swept through the room, even though the windows remained shut. Barron frowned. No, it can't be. He got out of bed, walked to his bookshelf, and pulled out an old family journal. The pages had yellowed with age, yet the memories within remained vivid. The air is never truly free. Once the door has opened, it can never fully close. Barron swallowed hard. The dark sanctum may have fallen, but its traces were still out there. That night, a mysterious letter appeared on Barron's desk. No one had entered his room. The sender, Malachi. Barron opened the letter. His hands trembled slightly. The words were written in deep red ink, the handwriting bold and unwavering. "Barron, did you think it was truly over? You were wrong. The sanctum was never the only one. There are others, waiting, watching for their chance to return. I have lost, but that does not mean you have won. Remember this, if you do not rule this world, someone else will, and they will not be as merciful as you." Barron clenched the letter in his fist. Others. A chill filled the room. This time, it wasn't just a feeling. It was a warning. The dark sanctum might have been defeated, but the forces of darkness had never truly disappeared. 1 month later, under the cover of midnight, Barron left the White House. He traveled to a secret location outside the city, a place mentioned in the letter's final lines. There, a man waited. He wore a black suit, but he wasn't a government agent. He carried a dangerous aura similar to the ones Barron had faced before. "Master Trump, at last, we meet." Barron crossed his arms, his gaze cold and steady. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "You may have destroyed the dark sanctum, but that doesn't mean you destroyed everything." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "The sanctum was only one branch. There are other organizations, many more. And now, you have become a thorn in their side." Barron's heart pounded. Could Malachi have been right? Was the real battle only just beginning? The man continued. "The world you think you saved is merely the surface. Below it lies something much older, much darker. And they're watching you, Barron. Waiting." Barron narrowed his eyes, determination burning within. The cycle he thought he had broken was far from over. The true war was only about to begin. What you destroyed was only the tip of the iceberg. The others, far stronger than you can imagine, won't let you rest now. "Who are they?" Barron demanded. The man gave a cold smile. "They are those who have manipulated human history long before the dark sanctum ever existed." A chill ran down Barron's spine. The man's smirk widened. "You could choose to run, but I don't think you will." Barron clenched his fists. No, he wouldn't run. If there were others out there, he would face them. The next morning, Barron Trump stood on the balcony of the White House, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Washington, D.C. looked peaceful, but he knew this peace was only temporary. Donald Trump stepped out, joining his son. "What's on your mind, son?" "That my battle isn't over yet." Donald Trump remained silent for a long moment. "So, what will you do?" Barron took a deep breath. "I'll prepare." Because this time, it wasn't just the dark sanctum. This time, he would face something far greater. 3 days after the final battle, Barron Trump sat alone in his study. From the window, the city lights of Washington, D.C. glimmered brightly, but inside him, everything felt different. He had defeated Malachi. The dark sanctum had collapsed. But why did the unease still linger? Could it really not be over? He opened the old Trump family journal. The pages had yellowed with time, yet the words remained clear. The air is never truly free. Once the door has opened, it can never fully close. Creak. A cold breeze swept through the room, rustling the papers on his desk. The windows remained shut. Barron's heartbeat quickened. Something isn't right. That night, a mysterious letter appeared on Barron's desk. No one had entered his room. No signs of the sender. But Barron knew only one person could have sent it. Sender, Malachi. Barron opened the letter, his eyes locked on the words written in deep crimson ink. "Barron, did you truly think it was over? You're wrong. The sanctum was never the only one. Many others await their return. I have lost, but that does not mean you have won. Remember this. If you do not rule this world, someone else will. And they will not be as merciful as you. A cold breath swept through the air. Barron's fears were confirmed. The dark sanctum may have fallen, but the forces lurking in the shadows had not disappeared. Clenching the letter tightly, he whispered, I destroyed one organization, but others still remain. 1 month later, under the veil of midnight, Barron left the White House alone. Following the instructions in Malachi's letter, he arrived at a secret location outside the city. A warehouse, long abandoned and cloaked in darkness. As Barron stepped inside, a deep voice echoed from the shadows. Master Trump, at last, we meet. A man emerged. He wore a black suit, no government insignia, no recognizable badge. But the aura he radiated was dangerous, unmistakably so. Who are you? Barron's voice was steady. The man smiled coldly. Someone who knows that destroying the dark sanctum doesn't mean you've destroyed everything. What do you mean? The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. The sanctum was just a part of a far greater network. Did you truly think there was only one organization pulling the strings of this world? You were wrong. Barron's pulse quickened. Was Malachi right all along? The real battle had yet to begin. The man's smirk deepened. They're watching you now, Barron. Waiting for you to make your next move. Because you, whether you like it or not, have become the greatest threat to them all. As the city lights flickered in the distance, Barron realized. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. And this time, the fate of the entire world was at stake. Barron felt a chilling cold run down his spine. So, what do you want from me? He asked. The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You become a thorn in their side. Who are you? Barron demanded. Slowly, the man removed his sunglasses, revealing deep gray eyes that seemed to hold endless secrets. We are the ones who have manipulated human history long before the dark sanctum ever existed. Then what do you want? Barron asked again. The man smirked coldly. If you believe you've destroyed the darkness, think again. The dark sanctum was nothing but a pawn. We are the true hand pulling the strings. Barron clenched his fists tightly. And what am I in your grand plan? The man tilted his head, studying Barron carefully. You are the only variable we cannot control. The next morning, Barron stood on the balcony of the White House, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He had believed that he could finally find peace. But now, everything had fallen into an even greater spiral. Donald Trump stepped out slowly, standing beside his son. What's on your mind? He asked. Barron didn't turn to look at him. His gaze remained thoughtful, distant. That my war isn't over yet. Donald Trump was silent for a long moment. And what will you do now? Barron took a deep breath, steadying himself. I will prepare. Because this time, it wasn't just the dark sanctum. This time, he would face the ones who stood behind the entire game. 3 days after the mysterious encounter, Barron sat silently in his office. Spread before him were classified documents, files detailing secret organizations operating across the world, groups that had manipulated history for centuries. Every page revealed darker truths. Every name, every event connected to something far more sinister. Barron knew now. The battle he thought he had won was only the beginning of a much larger war. This time, he wouldn't just be fighting shadows. He would be facing the architects of the world's destiny themselves. We have never truly been free. The man's words from that night still echoed in Barron's mind. Every war, every major political event, even seemingly random disasters. All of it had been orchestrated long before. Barron opened Malachi's final letter. You cannot fight them. But if you dare try, be ready. Because this time, you will not just battle the darkness. You will face the ones who created it. Barron closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, steady and calm. He was no longer the naive boy he once was. He knew now. His choices wouldn't just affect him. They would shape the fate of the entire world. 1 week later, Barron received an invitation. A secret meeting. This time, not in the shadows. Not in some hidden underground chamber. But in the heart of Washington, D.C., inside one of the most luxurious buildings in the world. As Barron stepped into the conference room, he was met by 12 men and 1 woman. All familiar faces. Billionaires. Global political leaders. The ones who controlled the world's economy. The man seated at the center smiled. Master Trump, you've finally arrived. Barron pulled out a chair and sat, his gaze never leaving them. What do you want from me? The woman spoke, her tone calm. yet chilling. We want nothing. We only want to know. Which side will you choose? Silence fell over the room. The meeting stretched for hours. No threats. No violence. They simply spoke of reality. Of how the world had been controlled all along. Of how every event had its reason. You could join us. The man at the center said with a smile. You would have limitless power. He paused. Or you could disappear. Just like those who challenged us before. Barron listened. But his mind was already made up. He stood. His eyes locked onto each of them. You think you are untouchable. But history always changes. I will stand with neither you nor your enemies. I will create my own path. Another man shrugged, sighing. Then you have just declared war on the entire world. Barron gave a faint smile. No. I have just declared war on those who believe they can control this world forever. Turning his back, he walked out. The new battle had begun. Do you believe there's truly a force controlling this world? Leave a comment and share your predictions for the next chapter of the story.